Hello everyone, this is Lydia and I'm here to talk about when it's acceptable as a writer to refer to yourself as an author, when we have decided that it's okay to call ourselves by this title. And I really don't think the answer is cut and dry, but I do think it's a lot easier than people like to make it. I remember back when I wrote fan fiction, there's no way I would have called myself an author. I was just a person writing fan fiction. I'd never created my own story. I've never even finished a project. And I remember thinking, once I finish a project, once I write something completely, I'll feel better about myself as a writer. I don't think I thought I would be able to call myself an author, but I would feel like I had something to make me join the club of writers, something to be proud of. Well, I hit that point. I had written a fan fiction with my best friend, and I was like, okay, I finished something, and it was a great feeling. But there was no way I would have felt comfortable myself referring to myself as an author. Um, I didn't even really feel like I could call myself a writer, and that's kind of another question. Are those terms different? Is one more acceptable in our mind? Um, I would argue that being a writer feels easier to call yourself because for some reason it feels more like an action verb, like I do write, so I'm a writer. But author feels more like a title of like, yes, I am an author. That's who I am. That's what I am. So I do feel like, for some reason, writer feels like a term people can kind of attach to themselves as something they do, and yet not feel like they're defining themselves in a way that they maybe haven't earned or that could be argued away from them. Um, Anyway, these are all facets of this conversation, I guess. But going back to my story, as someone who wrote fan fiction and kind of found out that they loved writing by doing that, I never felt like I could call myself even a writer at that point, really, much less an author. And I finished my first project, and that was kind of a tear in my mind, but I still didn't really feel like I could change my title or to talk about it. It's just something I did on the side for fun. It was just a hobby. And then I had in my mind that once I finished a book, an original work, then I would be a writer, at least. Still didn't really think I could claim the term author, but that was another hurdle in my mind to finish my own original story. And I think that is the hurdle in a lot of people's minds, to get you from this is just something I do to this is something I do. um, so I kind of had that built up in my mind. And so at some point, I think I might have been, I don't know how old I was. I was an adult, but I did my first NaNoWriMo. I plotted out my novel. Definitely, I had like scene by scene plotted out, ready for November. And then November came, and I wrote my whole novel, which pretty much clocked in at 50,000 words. It was a short children's novel, and I finished it. I did it. I completed my first story, but I still didn't really feel like I could call myself an author or a writer. And it was just a first draft. And the more you get into writing, the more you decide you want to pursue it, you start to learn more and more and more about what that world all entails and what you have to do to make it or be considered part of the club or whatever. You start to meet other authors, you start to read other writers, you start to read more, and learn more about the process of writing books, specifically novels. So I wrote an entire book, and I still didn't feel like I could call myself an author or really a writer. I mean, I would tell people I write, I enjoy writing, but I didn't really feel like I could give myself a title. I had a full-time job. elsewhere, and that's what I did. And writing was just something I liked to do. After I put that away, I started working on other projects. I didn't immediately start revising that novel. I maybe did kind of start to comb through the next draft, but I kind of started working on other projects and writing little bits, and I really felt kind of stuck, which I think a lot of people do after Nano. You just cram so much of your life into that month and just spilling out words, and then you can't really look at that draft right away. It's too much, it's overwhelming, you know, to throw around, not to throw around the term PTSD, but you kind of have some of that, the feelings toward that novel where it's just like, okay, I'm not gonna revisit that right now. I can't even see it clearly. It's too much of an emotional scab. not to not to give NaNoWriMo a bad name. I love NaNoWriMo. That was a huge leveling up point in my life where I felt like I had reached a level. Even though I didn't feel like I could call myself an author or even a writer necessarily, I had reached a level where I had completed something. I had written a story completely. And that was huge. That was huge for my confidence and just really huge. I'd never done something like that before. So after NaNoWriMo, I wrote some other things, and I kind of had a new level in my mind to reach to be able to be an author. Authors had a book that had many edited drafts, and they have a published book. That's what, in my mind, it meant to be an author, to have a published book. And that's what it takes to be considered an author, not just by everyone in the world. If you say I'm a writer, or I'm an author, they're going to ask you, oh, what have you written? Where's your book, basically. So in order to be an author, you need to have a published book. And that's kind of where my headspace was at. So my roommate, the one who I had completed my first, fan fiction with, she wasn't my roommate at the time, but she did move down here to become my roommate, because I got this house to rent and I needed roommates. So I asked my best friend to move in with me, and she did. And we decided to write a novel, write a book. And that was a wild year to 2 years. I think it was a year that we wrote our first draft within. That was a wild, crazy, busy time. We were working different schedules, different shifts, and all our free time we were just writing together. And it was a blast. It was definitely way more fun to kind of hold yourself that deadline with someone who is, one of your best friends working alongside of you. We write really well together. That's not always the case for people. A lot of authors have asked us, how did you do that together? But it worked really well for us. You have to have that relationship and be able to compromise with somebody. Anyway, I can talk more about our book in a different video. But we wrote our butts off. We edited our first draft together at least once, maybe twice. We sent it to editors, cousins, and I have a cousin who's an editor. My dad has written things for years of his life. Knew some readers. We sent our draft to these people to edit it for us. We received it back. We edited it again. I think we sent it out again. We edited it again. We did many, many drafts. And this whole time we were planning to self-publish. I didn't know very much about the publishing industry, but having the job that I have, I knew that I would have to learn, and I would have to put the time in to learn the industry. I couldn't just, send my book to a publisher. It would be a process, a long learning of a very old industry. So and specific industry, honestly. So I thought, you know what, let's self-publish. We can get physical copies. We can have a book. We can have a book that we can, our friends and family who keep asking where our book is, they can read it. They can They can order it through Amazon, through barnesandnoble.com. We can have a link. We can have this book in our arsenal, and we can be a published author. And so, I mean, I think a lot of people who self-publish, it's kind of this fast-track mentality, which I guess you could say we have because we didn't want to wait for years and years and years for additional traditional publishing to pan out. We wanted to have a book, but we didn't fast track it as far as like slap our first draft up onto, Amazon by any means. We went through many drafts. We went through drafts where we read the drafts out loud. It was a crazy couple of years of working on this book. I have done design and photography before. I made our book cover. Ashley formatted it, and we had to set up a business because we're two people, so we couldn't have, the profits or whatever just go into one of our bank accounts, which is kind of how Create Space tries to set things up for you. We had to have a shared bank account, which meant we needed a business bank account, which meant we had to set up a business LLC. That was a crazy time. Oh goodness, of setting up our own business and publishing our first book. So we did all of that, and I kind of felt like this is amazing, and it was amazing. We published our first book. We have a published book. Our local library bought copies. Friends and family brought copies. We got many lovely letters from people who don't really know us, but who knew, our families or whatever, who got the books and read them and took the time to write to us and about how they appreciated our book, which it's amazing. But we were self-published, and I kind of remember I still felt like I couldn't call myself an author. And that's not because I don't think self-publishing is worth it. I think it is. But I just still felt like I couldn't call myself an author. And I think that's because once you get into this space, you start to see a bunch of other people's opinions about it. Now, most of my friends and family and the people I've run into go, oh, you have a book. Oh, I can buy it from Amazon. That's great. And they consider you an author. But a lot of your peers, and I think it's pretty normal to want the approval of your peers, especially in the industry that you're in. A lot of people don't consider self-publishing as counting. They don't consider it as counting at all. A lot of people a lot of means that you can use to kind of to promote your book once you're self-published. A lot of those people won't accept self-published books, which I understand. It's hard to know. You're dealing directly with the author, which can be, you got to be careful about emotions and hurt feelings and stuff like that there. And you're also, you can't guarantee whether this author put in the work. Plenty of people throw up their first draft on Amazon, and maybe, maybe that's a good first draft, but it's still a first draft. And the people who you're trying to market your book through or send your book out, they don't know whether you're one of those authors or not. Until they kind of already accepted something from you, accepted a free copy for review, or accepted a sponsorship deal where they share about your book. These ways, these people that you want to be able to use to help you market your book so people know it exists often won't take self-published work. So a lot of the industry does not acknowledge self-published authors as real authors. So then you get into the question yet again. Am I an author? Can I call myself an author? I've written a book. People have read this book. It's been published. But can I call myself an author? Because other people won't agree. Now, I have not traditionally published anything at this point. I've researched it a lot more. I may in the future traditionally publish a book. I kind of would like to continue to do both, kind of diversify what I'm doing a little bit. I'm sure some people would say I have wasted my debut by self-publishing. Um, I don't feel that way. I think it was a very good stepping stone, and what it did for me in terms of feeling like I have made progress and stepped forward, and the amount of learning that it took to research that side of the industry, I'm very glad I went through. Um, I'm very glad I have a book, that is done and out there. I'm very glad I had that experience. But looking into traditional publishing, I'm trying to keep an open mind because I want to make sure I'm doing it for the right reasons. And I want to make sure I am not doing it for the reasons that, not doing it just to be able to feel like I can call myself an author. I think a lot of this boils down to imposter syndrome, which a lot of creative people struggle with. Um, how we view worth in our society today, and also just kind of an elitism in the industry that I don't think we should be encouraging. Um, you can't rely on other people saying whether you're an author or not. You can't define yourself and your worth and what you do based on others' opinions because they're always going to be higher and higher and higher. Like there's always going to be those people who don't consider you an author. So if I, in my heart, don't feel like I'm an author until I have a published book by a publishing house that isn't me, what is going to stop me from reaching that level and then feeling like, my publishing house is a small publishing house, and I'm not going to feel like I'm a real author until I'm published by one of the big five. Or, beyond that, I'm not going to feel like a real author until I quit my day job and I'm making a living off of my work. That is almost impossible in this day and age. Or I'm not going to feel like a real author until, I can find my book in a bookstore. I'm acknowledged by other authors. I, am putting out more than one book a year, or I've written some great literary work, or I've won prizes and I'm acknowledged for my work. If you live your life, if you live your life feeling like you're not an author until you've reached some level acknowledged by other people, I don't think you're ever going to feel like you are an author, because those are just rungs people put up, roadblocks they put up in people's way to make themselves feel good by saying, I'm better than this level of author. It's a way to separate themselves from everyone else and kind of put themselves up on a pedestal. I'm sure there are plenty of authors out there who look down at other best-selling authors because they only come out with a book every 3 years. They're not meticulous and disciplined about it. They don't get up at 5 a.m. and write every single day X amount of words. People, especially authors, like to put these standards for themselves and then use those standards as a way to look down upon other people. And that's not just authors. That happens all over every industry. People like to put other people down to make themselves feel better about themselves, and it's sad, but it happens. So I think for me, as opposed to letting myself continue down this path of not calling myself an author until X, Y, or Z happens, I've kind of been correcting my mindset. I am an author. I write books. I tell stories. I'm an author. I've shared my work, and wherever you feel comfortable or don't feel comfortable drawing that line is kind of up to you. But I would make sure you don't try to weed out whether other people who call themselves authors are authors. Like if people are writing stories, let them be. If you call yourself an author and you've literally never sat down and written anything in your life, I'm not really sure you should be calling yourself an author. But if you have, dozens of projects that you are working on regularly, and maybe one of them's not done yet, I think you can probably still call yourself an author. You can definitely call yourself a writer. Just make sure you keep going and don't stop, and don't become lax in working towards your goals. Don't go, oh, I wrote half a book in high school once, I'm an author. Why would you even claim that? That's clearly not something you want to do if you're 27 and you haven't touched it since. It's clearly not something you want to do. But if you feel that pull to keep going back and writing stories, and you keep working on them, even if it's not every day, um, I think you get to call yourself, I think you're part of the club. And I think we as authors should not be worried about keeping the club lines clear. Like whether someone calls themselves an author and they haven't finished their manuscript, or they haven't published their book yet, or they only self-published their book, it's not up to you to decide whether they get to join the club or not. You're not the club's gatekeepers. These people, they love writing and they love telling stories, and that makes them part of my club. That makes them, someone like me. And we should be encouraging these people and lifting them up and helping them on to the next level, and encouraging them to keep going and not going, oh, I can't associate with you because you're not really an author. So I would say if you're an author, if you're working towards your goals, if you're writing stories and you're a storyteller, go ahead, call yourself an author. Put it on your Instagram bio and just be honest about where you're at. Like just be honest that, yeah, I'm an author and I'm hoping to publish my first book very soon, or I'm hoping to complete my first manuscript. Just, don't try to make yourself sound better and more intellectual and more successful than you are. Just be honest, and I think you'll find that a lot of people will come alongside you. The people that you want to come alongside you will, and they'll be happy for you, and they'll encourage you, and they'll probably help you, because a huge part about being an author is having to lean on other people and their experiences to know what to do next, because there's a lot of stuff in the publishing industry and marketing and in book writing that are not something that you just naturally know. Like, you have to learn. So, yeah, I would encourage you, if you tell stories, if you write books or poems, or, whatever, if you write and you keep writing, go ahead and call yourself an author, because that's what you are. And one day you will have a book to give to somebody. Whether you self-publish, whether you traditionally publish, whether you publish for free on an internet website or get published in a magazine, you're a writer, you're an author. And I really hope people love reading your stories. Thanks for watching, guys. Bye.